I know someone making $240,000 a year who sat in his kitchen last Tuesday having a quiet, suffocating panic attack over a $400 car repair bill. And, actually, no. Let me be honest with you right now. That wasn't a friend or a colleague. That was me 3 years ago. If you are smart, hardworking, and doing everything completely right on paper according to society, but your checking account still feels like a tightrope every single month, it is not because you need to track your lattes or download another budget spreadsheet. It is because your brain is actively working against you. I'm Jordan, and for a long time, I believed that financial peace was simply a math problem where higher income automatically equaled less anxiety. But the more money I made, the worse the low-grade panic got. I keep coming back to this weird paradox where the smartest people I know are almost always the ones living closest to the financial edge, even when their paychecks look incredible from the outside. Today, we are dismantling the psychological traps that keep intelligent people feeling permanently broke. And along the way, I'm going to show you the invisible drain I call the smart person's tax, an overhead that quietly wipes out 40% of high earners' cash before they even wake up on the first of the month. Hold on to that idea, because when we get deep into this, you will probably realize you paid it this morning. Later on, I will also share the two-account rule that finally broke my own cycle of money anxiety. It goes completely against what traditional wealth managers and financial planners tell you to do with your paycheck. But first, we have to look at the math that never seems to add up. Chapter 1. The math that never seems to add up. When you are 22 and making $35,000 a year, you assume that making six figures will feel like crossing a finish line into total safety. You tell yourself that once you hit $100,000 or $200,000, you will finally breathe out and stop checking your bank balance before buying groceries. But then you hit that number, and instead of feeling secure, you feel strangely more fragile than you did when you were broke in college. Your fixed overhead is quietly grown to consume almost every dollar of that new salary, leaving you with the exact same tiny margin of safety you had a decade ago. The stakes just got bigger. The problem is that intelligence creates a unique blind spot. When you are smart, you assume your earning potential is a safety net that protects you from bad financial architecture. You tell yourself that if an emergency happens, you can just work harder, solve a problem, or earn your way out of it. So you build a life with zero slack. Every single dollar of your monthly income is spoken for by the time it hits your account. Mortgaged to a lifestyle that looks impressive on LinkedIn, but feels like a ticking clock behind closed doors. Chapter 2. The Spreadsheet Trap and Analysis Paralysis. Smart people love complex systems because complexity feels like control. If you feel anxious about money, your instinct as an analytical person is to build a 15-tab spreadsheet with pivot tables, custom macros, and multi-year expense projections. You spend hours optimizing a high-yield savings account to gain an extra 0.2% in interest, or you track every single receipt in a budgeting app with color-coded categories. It feels like real work. It feels productive. But almost none of that activity actually changes your net worth. I once spent an entire Saturday afternoon building an intricate tracking system to audit my monthly spending down to the penny. When I finally finished analyzing everything, I realized I had been paying $47 a month for 2 separate software subscriptions I hadn't opened in over 2 years. I sat staring at my screen for a second. That is literally 2 rounds of drinks I'd never even had, paying for tools I forgot existed, while I was feeling smug about optimizing my groceries by $12. Complexity is often just procrastination disguised as intelligence. When your money system requires a manual to operate, you will eventually abandon it the moment life gets stressful. Chapter 3. The reality of shadow lifestyle creep.
We need to talk about what actually drives this pattern, because it rarely starts with reckless spending or buying things you don't care about. It starts with a quiet phenomenon called shadow inflation. When you are a high earner working alongside other smart, successful people, your baseline for what feels normal shifts without you ever noticing. You don't suddenly decide to buy a luxury yacht. You just move to a slightly nicer neighborhood because the commute is easier and your colleagues live there. You start buying the organic groceries, paying for direct flights instead of layovers, and dining at restaurants where entrees cost $40 because that is simply where your social circle meets on Friday nights.
I remember sitting in my car in a concrete parking garage downtown at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. I had just finished a 14-hour workday at a job paying more than my parents ever made in their peak earning years. I opened my banking app on my phone just to check my balance before driving home. I had $214 in my primary checking account. Payday wasn't until the following Friday. I sat there with the engine running, looking at that glowing number in the dark, and the shame felt heavy in my chest. I knew exactly how I got there. Every expense made logical sense in isolation: rent, car payment, dinner out with clients, a weekend trip. But looking at $214 after working 80 hours that week, that was the moment I realized my high income wasn't building wealth. It was just funding a high overhead performance. Right now, you have to decide which game you are playing with your life. Are you playing the status game, optimizing your spending to look wealthy to people who barely notice you? Or are you playing the freedom game, building a system that buys back your time and mental peace? You cannot optimize for both at the same time. If you are realizing that your financial architecture is built around overhead instead of freedom, that is exactly why I put together our weekly private newsletter. Every Sunday morning, we share simple, automated frameworks to help high earners strip away the noise and build genuine financial independence without living like a monk. The link to join is right down in the description below.
Chapter 4. The Golden Handcuffs We Build Ourselves.
There is a strange trap waiting for people who achieve professional success early in their careers. Let me tell you about a guy named David. David is a senior strategy consultant making $180,000 a year. If you look at his life from the outside, he has won the game. He drives a clean German sedan, lives in a gorgeous high-rise apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, and wears tailored jackets. But David wakes up every morning with a tight knot in his stomach because 95% of his monthly take-home pay disappears into fixed obligations within 48 hours of payday. David desperately wants to leave his corporate consulting job to start his own boutique advisory firm. He has the skills, the network, and the client leads ready to go, but he can't make the leap. If David goes 3 months without his corporate paycheck, he misses his mortgage, defaults on his lease, and his entire carefully constructed life starts collapsing. He built himself a prison out of silk sheets and premium car payments. That is what I call golden handcuffs. We convince ourselves we are working hard to build a great life, but eventually the life we built becomes a relentless boss, demanding we keep working a job we have outgrown just to pay the monthly maintenance bills. Chapter 5. The Hidden Cost of the Smart Person's Tax. Remember earlier when I mentioned the smart person's tax? This is exactly where it collects its dues. The smart person's tax is not paid to the government. It is the massive, invisible overhead high earners pay strictly for peer group alignment and identity validation. When you view yourself as a top-tier professional, your ego demands that your external environment matches that internal identity.
You convince yourself that living in the expensive zip code is necessary for networking, or that leasing the luxury car is simply part of dressing the part for clients.
I used to tell people that buying premium brands and living in a luxury high-rise downtown was an investment in my professional reputation and personal energy. Actually, no, that is not quite right. That is a complete lie I told myself to justify spending money I should have been investing. The much more honest version is that I was insecure and terrified of looking like I had fallen behind my college peers. We spend thousands of dollars every single month renting symbols of success because sitting alone with our own thoughts without those symbols feels terrifying. Once you see the smart person's tax for what it really is, an insecurity subsidy, you stop wanting to pay it.
Chapter 6. Why Intelligence Defends Bad Financial Habits.
You would think that understanding compound interest and index funds would cure this, but it doesn't. Highly intelligent people are actually worse of correcting their financial behavior than average earners because they are masters of rationalization. When someone with an average IQ overspends on a weekend getaway, they usually admit they messed up and spent too much. When a brilliant analyst or engineer overspends by $5,000, they build a sophisticated mental defense. They tell themselves, "Wait, let me explain how my brain used to do this." You tell yourself that the trip was an essential investment in mental recovery after a grueling fiscal quarter, or that the luxury purchase was actually an asset acquisition with high residual resale value. Intelligence allows you to construct airtight logical defenses for deeply emotional financial mistakes. You can debate anyone into agreeing that your high overhead is justified, but winning an argument with your conscience doesn't put cash into an index fund. Financial peace does not come from intellectual superiority. It comes from emotional humility, the willingness to admit that your brain is rationalizing bad habits because changing those habits feels uncomfortable.
Chapter 7. Choosing Simplicity Over Complex Optimization.
The turning point happens the day you decide to value simplicity over optimization. Most financial content online tries to sell you sophisticated trading strategies, dividend capture models, or complex tax loss harvesting loops. But when you look at how genuinely wealthy people manage their personal cash flow, the ones who actually sleep well at night, their systems are almost boringly simple. They don't track every single coffee on a phone app. They don't spend their weekends shifting cash between 5 different promotional accounts to grab a temporary interest bonus.
True financial mastery means automating your core decisions so your brain never gets the chance to negotiate or rationalize. When your system relies on willpower and daily discipline, your intelligence will eventually find a clever excuse to break the rules on a hard Tuesday evening. A simple system with 2 rules that runs automatically every single month will beat a brilliant 15-rule system that requires you to manually log in and update spreadsheets every weekend. You don't need a financial engineering degree to build wealth. You just need a system that operates entirely out of reach of your own clever excuses.
Chapter 8. The Two-Account Structural Firewall.
Here is the exact framework that finally allowed me to escape financial anxiety without tracking every penny I spent. I call it the Two-Account Freedom Rule, and it completely separates your survival infrastructure from your daily emotions. Instead of dumping your entire paycheck into one giant checking account where bills, savings, and weekend dinners all slosh around together, you establish a strict structural firewall.
Account number 1 is your automated life infrastructure. The moment your paycheck lands, your fixed overhead, rent, utilities, insurance, and your monthly investment contributions are immediately pulled out without you touching a button. You never see that money sitting idle, and you never give yourself the opportunity to decide whether you feel like investing this month. Account number 2 is your guilt-free living fund. Whatever fixed amount lands in that second account after infrastructure and investing are funded is yours to spend completely guilt-free.
If you want to spend $400 on a fancy sushi dinner on a Tuesday night and drain that account to zero by month end, you do it without a shred of guilt or complex mental accounting. Because your wealth building and survival needs were already permanently secured the moment your paycheck arrived.
Chapter 9. Measuring wealth in time instead of dollars.
Ultimately, the reason smart people feel poor is that they are using the wrong metric for wealth. Society teaches you to measure your financial success by the absolute number on your salary statement or the brand of car in your driveway. But dollars are just tokens of exchange. The only metric that actually matters for human happiness is time freedom, the number of months or years you could walk away from your current income without your daily life collapsing.
When you measure wealth in time instead of status symbols, every financial decision shifts. A $10,000 raise doesn't mean you upgrade your apartment. It means you just bought yourself 3 extra months of freedom if you bank the difference. You start looking at luxury car leases not as impressive status markers, but as thieves stealing 2 years of early retirement from your future self. Once you experience the quiet, unshakable confidence of knowing you own your own time, looking rich to strangers loses all of its appeal.
When you look at your bank account right now, are you buying things that genuinely buy you freedom, or things that just prove to everyone else you are working hard? You don't have to play the exhausting status game anymore. Being truly wealthy starts the day you decide you don't need to look rich.
Drop a 1 in the comments below if you are ready to simplify your financial system this month.
If you want to build real freedom without the exhausting corporate financial jargon, join us here. In our next video, I'm breaking down the exact automated wealth system I use to invest consistently without ever watching the stock market.
Take a deep breath, close the spreadsheet, and give yourself permission to keep things simple. I'll see you next time.
Smart people build systems to impress others, but free people build systems to buy back their life.